So we will look at working in the context of a module. To register an observer, we'll look at how we can get that observer to work in different areas. And we'll also look at cron job configuration simply because I don't have a spot to put it and it's not worth an entire lesson. So, you recall yesterday we were speaking about event-driven architecture. And we looked at how events could be modeled in the real world, or how the real world could be modeled with events. And in Magento, I think in a few of the examples we found ways to get several different dispatchers in a given system. Well, in Magento we only have this one method of dispatching, and it's simply another static function call, mage dispatch event. And if you'll recall, I mentioned that it's just some specific string with an array of objects passed in. Okay? That's what it looks like everywhere an event is dispatched. So inside the dispatch event method in this class, and again, this class is found at appmage.php. So you can actually look at the definition for this and see all we do is again look at our XPath, and we go and we find some XML. So again, we're back to XML configuration. So I know I piled a bunch of XML on you yesterday, and I'm going to heap on some more today. But we look for observers node, and then we find under the observers node just more XML that tells us about what we're doing and who's going to be doing it. Okay? So just know that if you really want to get at the internals, this one is very high up in the code. Again, just look in appmage for dispatch event method. So observers. Okay. What happens with an observer? Well, we need to create the event and the observer object. This is, by the way, this is material that is a little bit of background information and may raise more questions than it answers for you. It's not imperative that you know all of this background in order to create an observer and have it do something, which I think I'll demonstrate with the example at the end of this lesson. But for right now, I think you should just be aware that there are a couple of different objects at play in the event observer system, and that fundamentally what happens is through configuration, we cause a model to be instantiated, and then that model receives its data through the observer. Basically, that's how everything's passed in to our model that we want to do. We want to use to operate on whatever's going on. And after that, our model is free to access those objects and alter them, add to them, and then finish and let the execution stack continue. Okay? There's another thing going on here, and I'm going to have to get into it at some point, and we'll start talking about variant object, but I'm not quite ready for that just yet. So before we get into a nice practical example of event observers, I do want to point out that there are lots of auto-fired events. I think you recall me mentioning yesterday that there are several events which are automatically fired because just based on configuration of your object, you can actually pass in your own string to identify your object, and based on different methods that can be called on your object, well, you'll end up with these different events being fired. Here's a list. So, for example, if I have identified my string as Ben first, then, and I have this model, Ben first, well, it would be Ben first, load before, Ben first, load after, Ben first, save before. Basically, all this means is that without having to go in and create all of this, I can know that just because, for example, my model extends from the base models in Magento, from the abstract, that I have access to all of these events. So if I need to do something every time or say I have two modules, okay, and I need to do something to one of them with the other after it's loaded, I can use my event prefix load after. And this slide really has two purposes, and that is to also demonstrate or explain, point out that we do have this issue where there isn't that complete list of events in Magento. There are, if you search the net, you can find some lists. I think I've seen some pretty complete lists of all of the explicitly fired events up through, I think, Mage 1.4. But as you start to work with the system, you can come to see the use and application of these events, and also the methods that are wrapped around that are also automatically fired that actually in turn trigger these events. So I kind of apologize because this is a lot of background information and a lot of details for me to throw at you without actually showing you what it is we'll be doing. So I'll try and kind of quickly get to my example here. So the event object is responsible for the data, and back in older days of Magento, you would have to get at the objects through the event object. Now you can get to them through the observer, and I'll show you this in just a second. But what observers are, what they do. Generally, when you create an observer by convention, well, it is a model. Observers are always models. And by convention, you'll name it observer. So that's a quick way in your code to see that you actually have observers in your module. And of course, you would pack all of the methods that your module would have called in one observer file. Again, this is by convention. And then what kinds of methods you put in here often are utility methods. Magento uses this extensively, especially around the category objects in terms of moving them around in the administration panel. As far as defining observers must be public, and they always receive a variant event observer object as a parameter. And our example at the end of this lesson shows you just that. Inside there we have you can always get at the event object through the observer using getEvent. You can also find out whatever the event name is using getEventName. All right, so what do we do inside an observer? Well, modifying parameters. In this case, catalog product collection load before. So this would be before a product collection is loaded. And you see here, this is what the code looks like. So this string here is just specified, and we're passing in this. So this would probably be taking place in a collection object somewhere. And then inside our method, which is fired, we will receive the observer object. We'll take, we'll get the data from our collection, and here we're actually adding an entity ID. Okay, so we're altering that collection somehow. And the nice thing is, execution is happening. Our observer basically breaks into that execution. We're able to get at this collection object, do something to it, and then let it go, and execution continues to fire. So you can hopefully start to see that this is a pretty quick and powerful way to break into pretty much any spot in the code and actually make things happen. Very uncomplicated. Yeah, and here's the category move action. So there's lots of things to check on. Do we have the flat catalog enabled? You know, we need to probably perform this utility function. Well, all we're going to do is observe the category move event again, which was just specified in the code by a programmer at some point, and perform some utility actions. Yeah. Okay. Now, now that I've thrown about 15 different facets of observers at you, let's look at what really matters to you as a programmer and what you'll be doing. Anytime you want to do anything with an observer. You'll specify in your observer an area, in this case front end, and then inside the events node. So this is the structure of observers. Front end, events. So area and then events, and then the event that's being observed. So if I wanted to observe this event, catalog product collection load before, I would specify in my configuration file right here, catalog product collection load before, okay? And then inside that node, we have an observers node. So basically, you could consider that every event fired in the system could be specified as a node under events, and then inside each of those nodes, you would have an observers node. And the reason we have plural here is because there could be many, many different observers attached to any given event. So basically, the configuration is going to look at the event, is going to look for the event node. Inside the event node, look to see if there are any children of observers. And any children of observers then would be, the system would attempt to evaluate as, to instantiate an observer model. So, quick review. Area events, that's just the opening structure. And then the next level under events are the actual events themselves. So in that dispatch event call, that string is the node. Inside each of those nodes, you specify observers. And then inside observers, you need only specify something that is unique. There's no magic like it has to match your class group or anything, but by convention, you would want it to match your class group. So for me, I really almost grabbed a Sharpie. For me, we'd have a permanent observers lesson right here. I tend to use, so say in my module configuration, let's say I have config global models. And then let's say, you know, I like the namespace module convention, so I'll say config global models, and then in the case of my narcissistic example module, we'll say that's my class group name. So of course then in here I would specify, thank you, class. Thank you, class. And then of course Ben first model. Okay? Just because I want to do like everyone else in Magento and keep my models in a model folder. And this is the path, remember? So, if I'm using this, I would probably use, once I use this short name for one object type, I would do that for all of them. So for config global blocks, I would also do this, and config global helpers, I would also do that. It just makes sense. It's very clean. What that would mean for me is that I would actually use that right here. That way, I mean, whereas I'm relying on this as a safe namespace for my stuff, that's what I would use there. I don't have to, though. The neat thing, though, is that actually if you do specify this, you specify here something that already exists, has already been defined somewhere else, and your module loads after that module, is you can actually alter the parameters. And this can be used, for example, the logging, the user logging in Magento, that delicious little treat that hits the database every time someone loads a page. You can actually just disable that via configuration just by accessing those events. So, all right. So I think we're pretty clear. Are we pretty clear up to here? The structure, again, just front-end events, the event name, observers node. Inside the observers is where we set up a space for our stuff. So I would put my class group name here, and then we have type. In this case, we're doing type model. What type model translates to is Mage get model. Okay. You can also specify object, but don't. I don't know why that's in there, and I'm sure it's deprecated. If not explicitly, it's just never used. So you have model, and then you also have singleton. Okay. So singleton is an option. So Mage get model, Mage get singleton. And of course, you could probably infer from the method name that you're going to get a singleton here. So, everyone know what a singleton is? Anyone not know what a singleton is? Singletons. Singletons in Magento are not like singletons in most other places. What a singleton is, again, part of the factory method. So what a singleton is just a means of getting, there should only be one of a particular object in a given execution scope if it's a singleton. So what happens with singletons traditionally is their constructor is protected. You basically call some function to get an instance. Basically, the class instantiates itself, or there's some factory method like we have here that will get an instance of an object. So if I say Mage get singleton catalog product, and I assign that to some variable foo, and then later on I say Mage get singleton catalog product in the same request scope or execution scope, and assign that to bar. Anything I do here, basically these two will always be equal because they're just references. Magento's implementation is different though, because while I do this and I can get the same catalog product instance, I can also call Mage get model catalog product and get a completely new catalog product model. Just one of those things. If you're used to singletons in almost any other framework language, then this is a little bit different. Just one of those little gotchas. So anyway, so we have two options for instantiating here: model or singleton, which will map out to Mage get model or Mage get singleton. Third option is disabled. It disables the observer. So again, and that's how you can override an existing configuration and just specify the same XPath and call disabled here for type. Okay. Now the other two parameters inside of our little spot in the observers node: class, training, observer. Okay, this is the string that gets passed into either get model or get singleton. Simple. It's instantiated, and then this method is called. Okay? So in this case, I would expect your training is going to map somewhere. So somewhere there's a training module, and it has a class group specified and everything. So what would happen in this case is the code. We'll call mage get model training observer. Okay, so then we have an instance of our class, and then the code will run this bind customer login method. Okay? That's configuration of an observer. The cron job is something you set up on your server to hit the cron file, cron PHP or cron shell script. That in turn schedules jobs in Magento. So in system configuration in the admin panel, there's a spot to there's a spot for configuring how far out the cron script, when it's hit, how far out it should look to schedule jobs. And these all these jobs and their states and everything and their history end up in a database table, a cron scheduled, I believe. So it can be a bit of a misnomer to see cron job here and to see cron job out in Magento, because there's really just the one cron script that need to be hit, and then internally just uses the settings that you've configured to evaluate this cron expression to determine whether or not it should schedule the job. Just know that it is possible to schedule tasks. I mean, it's a heck of a utility, because if you think about it, maybe your module has some very complex indexing that needs to go on. Well, set up a schedule for it. Make sure it's not running all the time. Yeah, any number of tasks that you may have, you can accomplish with these with this cron tab configuration. Also, we want to point out that part of the problem, if you're used to this syntax, which I like this is very nice and clean. Over here, rather than just have these nice separate nodes, the whole thing is actually combined. So catalog, product, index, or price would be what would be passed in to get model, and then this double colon split off and run the reindex all method. Okay, just a little difference in syntax that I might wish were a little more consistent with the observers. Any questions? Okay, let's take a walk through observers, and let's do fun stuff with them. So, hopefully we all have our custom module here. So let me bring up. Actually, let's walk through. Let's create a. Let's just walk through creating a brand new module. Okay. I think that'll be fun. I've got Ben. I've got my. So what's my first step when I'm making a module? Well, yeah, let's make our registration or activation file. And I know I switch the term on that pretty much every other time, but I haven't found anything that conclusively says one way or the other how we should call them. So I think they both apply. So in app Etsy modules, so here we go, app Etsy modules. Again, this is the directory that is inspected for any XML file. This is where Magento discovers all the modules that it has. I'm going to make an XML document, and I'm just going to call it foo_bar.xml. And I'm going to bump my font size back up. Is that still legible for you guys in the back? Okay. All right, so I need my root node, which will always be config for configuration files. And then inside there, my modules node. Okay? And then I'm planning on, well, this is my foo bar module, so I'm probably going to have foo as a namespace and bar as a module name. So that means a foo folder, which contains a bar folder, which means that I have to have this here, right? Because what does Magento do? Well, Magento will look in this modules node and see whether our module is active, which it will be, because we just told it so. And then code pool, big P in pool, and we'll be in local again. So again, what the system is going to do is say, okay, well, all right, I see a node here, active, true. Okay, true. Well, I need to go find out about this. So we'll take local. So system says active. Look in the local code pool, so app code local. And then inside app code local, we'll just do a string replace here to find our path. So we'll have a foo folder, which contains a bar folder. And in there, we'll look for an etc folder and a config XML file. All right, I'll leave this open and I will start creating my module. I don't want to find. Am I finding again? So. All right, so again, I just created foo, bar, and etc. And inside etc, I'm going to create a config file. Okay. Well, okay, so what's our first task? Register an observer on product after load. Okay. That's a mouthful. So, after load sounds like one of those automagical events. All right. So, I need to set this up in an area. Let's do it on the front end first. So, area configuration, front end, events. Okay? And then what do I need next? Considering that we're in the events node. Yeah, we'll take the event. That's what we have to match. But I'm not sure. How do I find that out? Well, I can look at, all right, so this is a catalog product model. So maybe I can look in core, mage, catalog, model, product, or not the product folder, but the product file. And let's see. Is everyone done with the registration file? This one here? Yeah? Good. Close that one up here. Move this one open for a second. So, how do I find that out? Oh, it's right here. Event prefix, catalog product. That's cool. If you don't specify the event prefix for your model, it uses, I believe, core abstract. So, yeah. basically you and others may have core abstract load after, or load before, or save, firing if you don't specify the event prefix. But if you extend from the core abstract model, you can just specify this protected property. So catalog product load after, not after load, but load after. Okay, so now I have my event prefix, and as we saw in the code, it's catalog product load after. Okay, now in this particular event node, we want to talk about observers. Okay, so what comes next?
Unique name of the observer.
Exactly. Our little space in this event's observers node. And all we do in here, what this is really just a container for the parameters of our observer. Okay? To keep my code readable, I will without fail use whatever I've decided for my class group names, which I erased earlier. So in my module configuration, say this is my module configuration. All right, I would have global and global models, and of course, hoping to point something out, but I'll have to point it out this way. So if I specify my class group name to get passed into get model, and I didn't actually set up my class group name here, I would have had an error. In fact, I'll do that first. So, type. By the way, the default type, if you don't specify type, is singleton. So here we have model. I just want to use a model, and I could specify singleton, and I could specify disabled. Okay? Or object, but don't do that. It's just silly. All right, then for class, I just need to pass in what? Right. Yeah. So when I read this as, okay, I'm going to call get model. I have to pass a string into get model. That's what goes in class here. So it's going to be foo, var, and observer. Just by convention, we want to call it observer. And then there's one more argument, and that's the method. Okay? So in here, what I like to do with these method names is I like to just camel case the event. Again, just keeps things readable. So I can copy this. All right. Gesundheit. Okay, so let's see. I'll leave this up here for a second. Does anyone have any questions right now, as you see this come together? So this is exactly the same process that you'll go through if you're making an observer. You'll need your module. You'll need to have this configuration present, and then you just need to create your model file, and you have a functioning observer. It's that easy. Let's see what happens in the front end. really nothing here. Let's look at like, oh no, I don't want to, computers. Yeah, look at computers. All right, well, I know I need to configure my class group here, so I'll just need to specify foobar and then class. And then the path to my model files. Foo bar model. So that probably means that I need to make the file. So in the foobar, I'll make a new folder, model. And inside model, I'll need to make an observer.php class file. Put your code here. Thanks, NetBeans. All right, so, well, I know for my class prefix that it's going to be foo bar model observer, and I extend nothing. So then what I always do is I copy my method name from here, and again public function, and I'm going to receive a variant event observer. And everywhere in the code is used this, the variable is just always called observer. So let's see, this is well, okay, what do we do? What are we doing here now? Let's do this. Let's say product was observer get product. Oh, that's one of the rough things to know about observers. So for these automatic things, automagic things, we get at the things that the objects that we want sort of intuitively. In this case, I just know it's get product. Yeah. Sorry. Generally, I mean, with your entities, you're going to have something like, if I was getting a customer, it would be get customer. It's going to match up with your entity declaration in the config. But it is, I mean, it's fairly intuitive. It's just get and then the name of what you're getting. So get product, get customer, get order, get quote. In this case, product. So what do we want to do? Product, let's see. Let's say, well, how are we going to know this is working in the front end? Well, we can say product. Let's see, observer get product. We'll see product. And set name. Actually, we'll set name. Let's see. Let's say someone in marketing got a great idea. We're just going to add is cool to all of our product names. So, product set name, and then we'll just do product get name. We'll talk a little bit more about these methods in a second. And then we will concatenate is cool. Let's see. Am I doing something? Oh, yeah. Semicolon. There we go. let me go back to let me save my configuration here. Is everyone done with this configuration file? Certainly. So again, let's take a second and look at this config file. Global, models, set up our class group name. Again, best convention, namespace, and module. And then in there, we have to specify our class prefix inside this class node. All right? And then here, we're using the area config. In this case, we're in the front end area. And we have, in the events node, specified the event we want to observe. And then we have an observers node so that we can put our thing in there. Yeah, I mean, you can really take this. In fact, you might want to, you could comment this a little further and say, you know, event and unique for event. Look at that. Now we've loaded. And now, I told you it was cool. Yeah, look at that. That's, man, that's something. Thank you, marketing. Those are great ideas. Okay. So, all right. I can close you down. Okay. All right. Well, that was fun. Okay. How do we? Our next task is to make it work on the. So we've got it working on the front end. Now we have to make it work in the admin. And then we have to make it work in both areas. So if we want this to work, so for example, in fact, I can demonstrate this to you. Acer Ferrari 3200. Let us look for this product in the database. Let me log in again. Name. Hey, look at that. And you see, the is cool isn't there. That's because we're in the front end configuration area. So we need to do something about that. Let's look in here. Okay, how might we do that here? Well, first of all, let's look at the areas that we have. Let's look at Mage, and this I'm going to give you a little bit more background information here, but Mage core model app area. Global, front-end, admin, and admin HTML. So those are the different configuration areas. I hate to say it. I've taught this class 7 times now, and I always forget whether it's admin or admin HTML. So let's take a look. I'm going to try admin first. I don't think it's admin. I think it's admin HTML, but we'll try this. So all I have to do to check that here is refresh the page. Look at that. Okay. Probably admin HTML. So if I change this to admin HTML, and there we go. Now, of course, we'd have some sort of like, you know, little race condition here. I mean, if we save this, then it'll be as cool, and then it'll be pulled in again. It'll be as cool. Yeah, it'll keep going. So, not the most practical example, other than to know, well, of course, you would just, if you had to do something like this, you would do it in the front end. Now, the interesting thing, of course, is that if we go back here and refresh, you know, our is cool is gone. And then, okay, third part of our task here is make it appear everywhere. That's real easy. Just put it in global. And you see here how I have, let's see. Works there, works there.